Rudy goes on Fox and Friends after the interview on Hannity. I've been dying to talk to Alan Dershowitz about all of this, and he joins us now. Professor, how you doing? Good to talk to you.
Hey, I'm doing great. Nice to be back talking to you.
So, Professor, this happened right before my show last night, and so when I heard that statement from Rudy, I said, that's the reason for the interview. Okay, they had to get that out there, perhaps, because they know now that the government has these documents after the outrageous raid, in my view at least, on Michael Cohen's office. What was your take on how this went down last night?
Well, I think it really shows the virtue of silence. It's so much better if you have a case that's being investigated, and this case is the subject both of a civil lawsuit and perhaps of a government investigation. It's so much better to remain silent and present a single, coherent, consistent, factually based view in court at the appropriate time in response to specific questions. What happens is when everybody expresses a view, they may all be consistent, they may all line up, but they don't sound consistent when they come from different sources at different times. And it gives the media, particularly the media that is always out to get anybody in the Trump administration, it gives them an excuse to try to line up the statements, parse them, and try to show that there may be some differences. I mean, I actually see some overall consistency here. The way I understand what Rudy said was, look, the president gave this guy a $35,000 a month retainer. He didn't earn it. His job was to, solve these issues. He had discretion how to do it. He solved the issue by making this payment. The money came out of the retainer that he was paid, the unearned parts of the retainer that he was paid. The president wasn't told of specific instances of what Cohen had done until he learned about it later. That all is consistent, but it just doesn't sound consistent when it comes from different sources, each of whom give a little bit of the story.
Yeah, well, I always remember my conversations with Brendan Sullivan, who, every time I would say, I want you to come on and talk about this, or he said, Laura, you've known me for like 32 years. Why would you think I would start litigating my cases in the press now? And he said, that's not how I have ever rolled, and that's not what I do. And I have never thought it was good. Yeah.
Right. He was a potted plant when it came to the media, and he refused to be a potted plant when he had a role to play in front of the congressional committee that was investigating it. That was the right approach. He learned that from Ed Bennett Williams. Ed Bennett Williams, who was a friend of mine, who was one of the greatest lawyers of the 20th century, had a rule in his firm. He said, no one talks to the media, no one talks to the media except me, and he would just whisper to the media. He represented the Washington Post. He had his sources. If he wanted a story in, he knew how to get it in, off and off the record, without attribution. But Williams was a master of the media, and I think everybody who works in that firm, David Kendall, Brendan Sullivan, all understand that the media can be your enemy, it can be your friend, and when you're under investigation, often silence is the best tactic.
Yeah, and Emmet Flood is, of course, from Williams and Connolly, and this is funny, Professor. When you've been just like you, I feel like I've been around for a long time now, and Emmet was my
You've been around like 6 years.
Thank you.
I've been doing this 54 years.
Well, thank you. Well, anyway, Emmet Flood, who's just hired by the president to represent him in the Muller investigation, was my co-clerk when I clerked for Ralph Winter on the Second Circuit.
Ralph Winter was my classmate.
That's right.
Yale Law School. He was always the smartest guy in the class.
Oh, so smart.
And then he became the smartest guy on the bench.
Oh, no, he's great. But it's just such a small world. So Emmet is one of my oldest friends in the world. And he's, he clerked for Scalia a couple years after I clerked for Thomas. We're just, we're old pals. But I've always said, he's one of the people, if I were Trump, Emmet would be the person I would hire. There's two people in Washington who are in their 50s and just top lawyers. And maybe Emmett's 60 now, but he's just a phenomenal lawyer. He's very quiet. He's I think he's the oldest of 10 kids. His father was a garbage collector in Chicago. I mean, incredible person.
To this question, and from everything I hear, the president tried to get Flood over and over again, and the answer was no. And suddenly, it's not that the president asked Flood just now, it's that Flood finally accepted. Why do you think he changed his mind? That's the question.
Well, I don't know, but I think some of it is, people have cases that are wrapping up. Emmett's one of the busiest litigators out there, and you do have a responsibility to your big clients to finish their cases, and or at least be in a position to hand them off to people who can properly litigate them or settle them. And
I like too is the bipartisanship that is shown in law. Here you have the law firm that not only represented Bill Clinton during his impeachment, but David Kendall has been Bill Clinton's personal lawyer since they graduated Yale Law School together in the early 1970s, and it's a firm that's well known for being largely Democratic over the years. Brendan
Ollie
Sullivan,
North,
obviously. Ollie North,
Ollie
that's
North.
a different one, yeah. But here they're bipartisan. They don't take, that's like me. I don't allow my liberal Democratic leanings in any way to intrude on my professionalism, on my support for the Constitution. And I think the fact that Flood is doing this represents the same kind of commitment to the rule of law.
I think that, again, raiding an attorney's office in a case like this, I still go back to that as a complete travesty.
Especially when you then turn over the material that could be privileged to FBI agents and government prosecutors to become the vetting team and the taint team, and then the American Civil Liberties Union issues a report saying, we not only don't attack this, we not only don't criticize it, we applaud it. We think it reflects the rule of law. Where is the ACLU? The reason I have been so vocal in this case, even though I'm a liberal Democrat, is the ACLU is missing in action. They collect all their funds from hate Trumpers, and if they did anything that would be perceived as in any way supportive of the president's civil liberties, they would lose financial support. And so the ACLU has become so totally committed to the hard left Get Trump group that they have abandoned their commitment to civil liberties.
And that's so depressing. And that's extremely depressing. Let's go into the situation with the subpoena where Muller threatens to subpoena the president to testify, Professor.
Well, he has that power, and the president has the power to fight the subpoena in court. And I suspect one of the reasons Flood is now on the team is he is a brilliant constitutional and legal scholar, and he has the capacity, probably better than some others on the team, to fight this all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And I think the president has substantial ammunition. Number one, I don't think that special counsel can question a president's actions if the actions were authorized by Article 2 of the Constitution. So they can't ask him, why did you fire Comey? They can't ask him, why did you fire Flynn? They can't ask him who he's going to pardon. Those are not questions that can be asked of a president any more than they can be asked of a United States senator or a judge reflecting their votes. So I think we're going to see that fight. We're going to also see the fight as to whether or not some of the questions go beyond the mandate and the authority of the special counsel. But there are going to be some questions that probably in the end the president will have to answer. And those are questions about his business dealings, because I think the courts are not going to support his claim ultimately that it's beyond the jurisdiction of the special counsel. And even if it is, it just gets shifted over to the Southern District where they can ask those questions.
I remember it was last August, I believe, that Ron Rotunda, of course, renowned constitutional scholar.
Wonderful man. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Anyway, he wrote that piece about indicting the president, and I think Starr asked him all those years ago to evaluate whether the federal grand jury could indict a sitting president, and he basically says, no. I mean, you really can't indict a sitting president. You agree with that, right?
I agree with that completely. In fact, I railed against the grand jury that named President Nixon as an unindicted co-conspirator, and I got the ACLU to criticize that. That was back in the day when the ACLU was the ACLU, because it's so unfair to name somebody as an unindicted co-conspirator. They can't fight back. They don't have their day in court. It's just like, writing something on a bathroom wall. You're an unindicted co-conspirator. Now what are you going to do about it? It's so unfair. And I don't think that a president can appropriately be named even as an unindicted co-conspirator in a grand jury indictment. But that's, reasonable people could disagree about that. Look, we're having a great constitutional debate. Some 16-year-old young woman came over to me at some event and said, "Do you think the president violated the emoluments clause?" And I said, "How do you know what an emolument is?" She said, "Well, I used to think it was a facial cream, but now I've been following this, and I've learned a lot about the Constitution." So we are really having a lesson in constitutional law. That's the only good thing, I think, that's come out of this whole mess.
Michael Avenatti has said that he's being asked, the attorney for Stormy Daniels, he's being asked to, perhaps join a cable network as a host of his own legal show, and it seems like a lot of his commentary is geared toward titillating the audience rather than representing his client. And he said this. We're going to go to the second soundbite, James. He was talking about the mindset of the Trump legal team. Let's listen.
They're in full panic mode. They don't know what to do. They're digging the hole deeper. And we're going to get to the bottom of this no matter how long it takes. And this is not going to end well. I said it a few weeks ago. I said it last week. I'm going to absolutely, no question, say it again this morning. This president will not serve out this term. I guarantee it.
Okay, and they're not going to show that. They're not going to show that clip 3 years from now when the president finishes his term, and they're not going to. The one thing about the media, they don't hold people responsible for prior views. For example, when I debated Tubin the other night on CNN, he said the president's definitely taking the fifth, and I said on television, I want you to show that clip when the president doesn't take the fifth. People feel free to make all kinds of predictions, and then the predictions turn out to be false. The media doesn't hold them accountable. So I hope the media shows the clip of these predictions when they turn out not to be the case.
But, that's the kind of thing a kind of loudmouth pundit would say. That's the kind of thing you say, like, "No, I guarantee it. I'll bet you $100 that Trump." It's not what you do as a lawyer. This is what I'm saying. The Daniels episode is now giving birth to all of these, sideshows and people like Avenatti, and you have to distinguish between what the legal posture of this case is and the blowhards that are out there speaking of things about which they oftentimes know little. And I'm sorry, but I would put that in that category.
The one thing about Avenatti, he has really made a molehill out of a piece of sand. He has taken an incident. Remember, if it happened, it was a consensual one-night affair years and years ago, and a settlement was made, and he's now at the center of all this. This is so peripheral. The president's not going to be foolish enough to testify about any possible relationship he had with Stormy Daniels. He's not going to make the Bill Clinton mistake that your former boss walked him into, Bob Bennett, allowing him to testify about his sex life. I don't think the president's going to make that mistake. So I think the whole Stormy Daniels thing is going to end up being a very small footnote to history.
Yeah, I think, again, to go from Russia, colluded or Russia interfered with the election, which is, if that happened, that's a serious problem, and whether Trump arranged for that or is involved in that, to, okay, this is a non-disclosure about someone trying to shake someone down for money. That is one step away from the blue dress, and it didn't happen in the Oval Office, I can tell you that. Alan Dershowitz, come on TV soon. It's great to talk to you. Love watching you. And thanks so much for being an honest broker in all of this. We'll